Welcome to our podcast, Living Our Best with Memory Loss. What makes this podcast unique is that 3 of its hosts, Bob, Dennis, and Sue Ann, have a memory loss diagnosis. The purpose of this podcast is for people to share their experiences with cognitive decline. It is not to provide medical advice. We are not doctors, and we stress that what might have worked for one person might not work for others. If anything you hear on this program inspires you to explore treatment options, we recommend you do so in consultation with your physician.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Living Our Best with Memory Loss. Now, we've been featuring folks with diagnoses and specialists in the healthcare field. Today, we're going in a little bit different direction, but it's one that's no less important. There are legal documents and decisions that have to be made to protect the assets in place at the time of diagnosis. Today, we're speaking with Shanna Browning, a specialist in this area with First Century Bank in downtown Knoxville. Shanna, welcome to our podcast.
Hi, Dennis. Thank you so much. I appreciate y'all letting me be here. Thank you.
We're honored that you're here.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Of course.
Good morning.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm great.
Well, is there people that are in your family that have dementia?
Yes.
And that's why you're interested in doing this podcast?
Yes, very much so. So my personal experience, my mother passed away in May of 2019 after a 9-year diagnosis with Alzheimer's. My dad was her caregiver, so we walked the path with her. My brother's in Chattanooga with kids, so my dad and I don't have children, but my dad and I both helped take care of Mom and my brother when he would come up and do that as well. So we're a very close family. In addition to my mom, y'all are not going to believe this, in addition to my mom, my grandmother was one of 12 children. Of those 12, 11 have been diagnosed and have passed away. There's 2 living now. One has Alzheimer's and one does not. So Alzheimer's in my family, and why I'm here is exactly for this reason, because I truly have walked this path. So, and it's a concern, of mine. My brother and I have that conversation quite a bit. So he's got 6 kids. I have none. He gets Alzheimer's. I don't. That's how this is going to work. So, yeah.
I like to call that God's wicked sense of humor.
That's exactly correct.
Mhm.
That's exactly correct.
And Shanna, just to jump in real quick, thank you for reaching out.
Of course.
We really appreciate it. So you saw our podcast
I
and then
did.
reached out to us. And I'm like, I read your story and I'm like, okay, you definitely have a seat here at Living Our Best.
Well, thank you for what you all are doing, because it's talked about, but not talked about. And so if that makes any sense at all, I think it continues to be. I mean, within the last week, I was reading, I think there were 3 celebrities that passed away, right, within 3 days of each other. And 2 of those were in my eras of the 80s, right? Growing up in the 1980s were 2 rock stars and young, 75, 63. Mom was 76 when she passed away. And then, of course, my grandmother lived with it for 20 years. So it's just, everything is different. Everybody is different, but it's still no less hard to deal with.
Well, then I think in your case, being genetic is very important to you.
Very.
Wow.
Very. It's always front of mind for me.
So, Shanna, what should we be thinking about?
So from a financial perspective, which is why I wanted to reach out to you all, is because, again, with my family, we were very fortunate that Mom and Dad had checking accounts and savings accounts and all their things. Both worked their whole life. And so when you have a parent that is diagnosed, that kind of shifts your thought a little bit about how you look at accounts. Okay. And so we dealt with this in my own family, but I've dealt with this also with friends. And in what I do for a living, which is community outreach, but I have been in the financial industry for over 30 years. So I've done a little bit of everything. And when you look at accounts, I had a friend that went through this with both of his parents. Both had dementia, Alzheimer's. And so what his situation was is that by the time his dad had passed away, but by the time his mom got to the level she was at, he was not on any of her accounts. From a banking perspective, we can't give any information if you're not on an account. Okay, that's for the protection of you as a consumer. That is your protection. I don't know these people coming in trying to get your money, so my concern is you. And even though I knew him and I knew what he was trying to do, they had never taken the time to put him on any of the accounts. So he had no access to money for her care, for medications, for anything, because he couldn't get to her accounts. So that, in addition to what stress you're already dealing with, is another situation that you've just added on top of. And so, what I hope that your listeners hear is that if you're walking this path, get ahead of it and get yourself on those accounts while your parent or your guardian or whoever you're taking care of understands that they can sign their name in what you're trying to do, because the bank looks at that for your protection.
So we're talking about a power of attorney?
It can be power of attorney, or you can just be a signer on an account. So when Mom got to a level where she could not write, we went ahead and added my brother and I to my parents' account. So if something happened to Dad prior to Mom, Dad's still living and thankfully in good health and is 84 years old. But if Dad had passed away before Mom, we would have been in trouble had we not already been added to the accounts, because Mom couldn't sign her name, right? Or sometimes she didn't know me. And if she doesn't know me, she thinks I'm stealing from her. So it's like a power of attorney, but it also can be a adding as a signer to an account. Or whoever you feel. It doesn't have to be a child. It could be whoever you feel is going to help take care of you.
Okay, so Shanna, define for us what is a power of attorney, a POA.
Power of attorney, POA, gives Bob, if I'm your power of attorney, or if Lori's your power of attorney, that gives her the ability to make any decisions for you that need to be made. Right. She has discretion by an attorney who has drawn that paperwork up, legal document, that a power of attorney gives me or Lori the discretion to help make decisions for you. So if I go down and I'm not on the account, they're going to look at that power of attorney. Now, they still may not give you any information or give Lori and I any information, but we do have a power of attorney. So I was power of attorney for Mom and Dad. I am now still power of attorney for my father. When Mom passed away, we did those again. Dad went through that process again to do that, to update it, since Mom had passed. So yes.
Well, yeah, like we've had a power of attorney for a lot of years. We did it a long time ago.
Yeah.
And because there's only the two of us.
Yeah.
And we took care of that.
Good. You should. It's hard. Nobody wants to talk about our own deaths, right? Or nobody wants to talk about money, because they tell you don't talk about politics, religion, or money. But you have to talk about money.
Yeah, I mean, we have no problem talking about it.
Right. And you have to.
Better to talk about it now
That's right.
than later.
That's
when
correct.
It's too
That's
late.
correct.
And then you're going through the legal mess of trying to get
It's stressful enough.
Yes, it's so stressful.
Well, if we wait a long time, then mentally you might not even be able to discuss it.
It's correct.
True. So what are the signs? Like, when would you advise somebody, Shanna, to get a power of attorney? When is the appropriate time to...
Now. I mean, there is no time like the present. There's truly not.
With or without a diagnosis? Just
I feel like, because one, you just never know what the day can bring. And, I feel like just as a power of attorney, it's just good to have just in case.
If I go to get a POA, I go to an attorney, not the bank.
That's
but
correct. Because it is a legal document. Yes, the bank can notarize for you for that power of attorney, but it has to be drawn up by an attorney. Yeah.
And something a lot of people don't know is once someone passes, power of attorney means nothing.
That
so
is correct.
My wife also works in the bank, and people come in and their parent or someone has just passed, and they'll say, "It's okay, I'm power of attorney," and she's like, "I'm saying, I'm sorry, because there's nothing that doesn't give you any power once they've passed."
And that's a great point, because when that individual dies, that power of attorney dies with them. So that's important to know. That's why it's good to have a power of attorney with checking accounts, but it's also good because when mom passed away, had dad not still been around, if dad had passed away and then we still had mom, at that point, it's just my brother and I, and we were both on the accounts. So we could go in and close the account. They're going to ask for a death certificate because they've got to have proof, but
Oh, interesting. So you should have, I didn't know that. So you should have not only a power of attorney, but your name on their
that's right.
accounts.
That's
That is
correct.
I had no idea.
Yeah, because it's the easiest way to tell you that when that person dies, the power of attorney dies with it. Yeah.
Maybe have an executor if you're the executor of the will.
Yeah.
That would give you some power.
Yeah,
There's a lot of process that goes along with that. Being able to, you can't just walk in with your executor papers.
That's
Because then you
correct.
got to go through another legal process to be able to access their account that way too.
Yeah, there's a there's a lot to it, and it's protection, right? It's protection for you as a bank client,
Right.
because
Now,
there's a lot of elder abuse. There's a lot
mhm,
of stealing of money. We go through it every day at the
sure.
bank. We get emails every day. Somebody's trying to come in and cash a check on their dead grandparents' account, or people will try anything at any time.
And the other thing that we've not spoken about yet is the healthcare power of attorney. And it's in that instrument you get to stipulate all the details about, you know, how your person is going to be handled.
That's correct. Your end of care life.
Right.
Right, is what does that look like? Do you want medication? Do you just want to be comfortable?
Mhm.
In mom's case and dad's case, like I said, my brother and I are very fortunate. They've planned their own funeral. Mom and dad both have already paid for their funeral. We just bury them. The funeral home's picked out, their plots, everything about it. They have just thought that through, which is helpful because as somebody that's still grieving
Yes.
the loss of someone you love very
Right.
much, it's hard to make those decisions in that right moment.
But it's important that they be stipulated
That's correct.
and not just left to chance or
That's correct. Because how hard is it to,
Horrible.
had it been mom and we'd have taken her to the hospital, they'd have hooked her up to a machine,
Yes.
and then we would have had to make that decision. And we knew her wishes were to just be at home and just die a natural death. And that's what she did. And that's what dad wants to do.
So a power of attorney would not cover the health thing?
The power of attorney, it is a power of attorney, but it's a healthcare power of attorney.
So
There are
it's a
two
separate
different.
one.
There are
Okay.
two different. They can be together. I could be both. I could be power of attorney and healthcare power of attorney. Anybody can be both. Just in this case, my brother is, and I'm the power of attorney for everything else: the house, the finances, everything else.
Going back to funeral services, etc., I went and handled all of that because I thought if something happened to me and Bob has a diagnosis, he would probably, and maybe this is years down the line, it would be difficult on him. So I wasn't even really thinking about him. Sorry, Bob. Even though I threaten you with a pillowcase over your head sometimes.
I could just go now.
That's right. But I just want folks to know too that you have to think in the opposite way, that for me it was I didn't want him to be burdened with that. That if something happened, I wanted all of that taken care of. So Bob, I don't even know if you're even aware of that. That I literally, you can drop me in the ground tomorrow. I'm ready to go. So, there
did
is a
not
fee.
know that.
There is a fee, Bob. Well, I don't know if I should have told you. Oh no, I hope I've not made a grave mistake here.
No pun intended, right?
Yeah,
The great
Yeah,
mistake.
no pun
No pun
intended.
intended.
But just to make it easier on him. So it's just, I think that's what people need to think about too. It's not necessarily that your loved one with the diagnosis is going to pass away. You have to think if that person is the survivor.
That's
I
correct.
think
And
that's
that was always
important.
our thought with mom and dad. It was always our question always was, what happens if dad goes first? Then now we've got mom who can't write her name, who can't do anything. We're fortunate in the fact, I'm sure you all are fortunate, that people, right, that can help you walk that path, that you can call a banker, you can call a funeral home and say, I need help. and they will help you. But for those that don't have any kind of relationship like that, those conversations need to happen now.
I
Now.
so agree. And I think what we did is as well. And again, I learned all this from seeing friends go through this. So it's not that I'm all knowing by any means. I still have so many questions and I'm still learning along the lines too. But I also have left a piece of paper with my brother who knows what we have, who can help Bob. So should something happen, somebody needs to know who to call, where papers are, what's up with all the accounts. It's just very important to have that designated person that you trust.
Well, that's right. That you trust.
That's
That's
the
important. It's important.
It may
and
not
there's not-
necessarily be a family member.
it may not be.
I thank you, I think.
She does love you. She's planning. She's planning for you.
I-
She does love you.
I
No
am
question.
planning.
And then there's the other just really practical stuff. I mean, um, my wife is my she holds my powers of attorney for both financial and for healthcare, and then our daughter
Mhm.
is her successor
Yes.
in the event that she should pass.
Yes.
But there's also the nuts and bolts. Just make sure, like we made sure that our daughter has copies of all of the paperwork,
Good.
that she has keys to our safe, that she knows the combination, and she knows what's in it. And she's got a list of all the things that she needs to attend to should both of us pass.
Yeah.
We're in a car accident or something driving together.
Good.
So that isn't necessarily a financial instrument that has to be signed or anything like that. It's just common sense.
That's right.
But it's important that that common sense be employed. And
I would add, in addition to that, any passwords that you have
right,
for anything. I've told my dad, you tell me where all your passwords are. So, with KUB, with cable, any of that.
right.
I need to know
Right.
so we can get into that.
I don't even know what they are.
Well, that's what Dad says. I
There's
don't
so
know what
many
they
of
are.
them, I don't have any idea.
Right.
I know. I don't think passwords help our memories at all, do they?
No.
It just confuses my brain even more.
And that's another item that's in the safe.
Yeah,
All the
good.
passwords for all the
Good.
stuff.
Shanna, since you've been through this with your entire family, with a diagnosis, what else can you advise us? I'm curious regarding checking accounts, savings accounts. Do you keep money in if somebody has a diagnosis and they're in the early stages? Do you continue to keep money in their checking account? I mean, there's nothing more.
IRAs also
Yeah,
are a big thing today.
that's right. Money markets. I mean, anything, CDs, anything tied to money. I mean, my suggestion would be have the conversation. No matter how hard it is to have the conversation, you've got to know, because regardless, you're going to know whether they're alive or whether they're deceased. You're going to know at some point. It's better to have the conversation, no matter how hard it is, with whoever your caregiver is, spouse, child, niece, nephew, aunt, whatever. My suggestion would be, yes, keep money in those accounts, because you also don't know what's coming out of those accounts, right? I have those conversations with Dad. Tell me what's automatically deducted. Tell me what's coming out. What's your budget? Because he's Social Security and a teacher pension, right? I mean, he's living on very little money. And so how are you financially, Dad? Let's have those conversations. It's a term we use in banking that you have to be financially naked in front of your family sometimes. And even though it's hard, you have to do it. Add somebody else. If there's a second one, or, in my case, it's my brother, myself, and my dad. If I was an only child, I would maybe put a cousin or someone else, because what happens if I go and then Dad can't, right? I mean, you always have to be thinking at least 2 steps ahead all the time. Caregiving is hard, and it's done out of love. It was an honor to care for my mom, right? I told Mom, hey, listen, you took care of me when I was a kid. My time to take care of you. And it's an honor to do that, but it's a lot.
It's a lot. And I think I should also warn folks that, for instance, my mother was our, second in command. My mother now has a diagnosis. So I would just advise people to stay on top of that. And when something like that happens, you need to shift gears.
That's right.
So
As soon as you see it, and I know some people, we look at it and say, well, it's just age. I understand sometimes it's just age, but in my case, with my family history, with your family history, it may not just be just in case. I mean, you need to look at that and say, maybe we should shift a little bit, so, yep.
Shanna, wow. Thank you so much
You're
for joining us.
welcome.
And thank you for reaching out to us.
Yeah.
That meant a lot to get your
Yes, of
email. So
course.
thank you. And we'd love to have you back again. And
Anytime.
just real quick, I'm so sorry for everything with
Thank
your
you.
whole family that you've been through with so many diagnoses. I mean, that's tough. But what you're doing here and sharing all this information with us rather, is priceless. And,
Well,
and we are
thank
so
you.
grateful.
Thank you.
We
It's
really
an honor.
appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is a side that nobody really thinks about, right?
and
I
they need
mean,
to.
you're trying to get through the day. But this is a piece that has to be talked about and thought about, and that's why I reached out. I just
Yeah.
thought this is an opportunity because I've been through it, and it's what I do on a daily basis with my job. So I'm happy to help, and if anybody reaches out to you and has questions, feel free to let me know how I can help with that too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you
You're welcome.
so much.
You're very welcome.